Welcome to Vineyard Church Dungannon, where we're walking together deeper into faith. The following message was given at one of our Sunday gatherings. For more information, visit vineyarddungannon.co.uk.
Okay, good morning, everybody. So I am Sharon, and I get to do the other bit. So the celebrations have all happened, and then it moves on to the next part that I'm going to speak on is all about Jesus going before Pilate, and this really shows us how Jesus really is the way, the truth, and he is the life. But there's so many different things that happen in between that bit, and we're just going to have a look at that. So what Ivana was talking about Sunday and what happened on Palm Sunday, but if we just move on to the next slide, it'll show us then what happened. Yeah. So in between the part that I'm saying and the part that Ivana was talking about, these are the different things that happened. So first of all, there was Palm Sunday, where the crowds have welcomed Jesus as their king, and it fulfills the prophecy in Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. But then on Monday and Tuesday, Jesus cleanses the temple and overturns the tables of money changers as he teaches daily in the temple courts. And then the religious leaders, called the Sanhedrin, they begin plotting to kill him, though Jewish council didn't have the right to execute the prisoners, which is why we find out why he goes to above in front of the Romans. And then on Wednesday, Judas Iscariot then agrees to betray Jesus for some silver, and this was one of his special friends, the disciples. And on Thursday evening then, we read about the Last Supper, and Jesus shares this last special meal with his disciples. Then late on Thursday night, Jesus prays in the Garden of Gethsemane, and at that time, he's just in that deep anguish and just praying to the Father, Lord, let this cup be taken from me, because he's God, he's fully man, and he's fully God, and he knows what's going to happen. So it just made me think, even looking at that before I looked at Pontius Pilate, that if Jesus needed to ask for the strength of God to help him through all of that, how much more do we need to get on our knees and ask for God to help us through our daily lives? So then, it moves on then from the Thursday night. The soldiers arrive. Judas identifies Jesus with this kiss, and Jesus is arrested. But Jesus has been praying to the Father, and he sends an angel into the garden at that time and strengthens him. So Jesus does have the strength to get through things. So then, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to ask Nicola and Robin, they're going to come up in a wee second now to just read the passage that we're going to be talking about today. Then I'm just going to give a very brief overview of the passage and then apply it to our lives today. What does that mean for us today? So I'm going to invite Nicola and then Robin. So they're going to read from John chapter 18, verse 19 to 23, and then verse 28 to 40.
The high priest then asked Jesus about his disciples and his doctrines. Jesus answered him, "I spoke openly to the world. I always taught in synagogues and in the temple, where the Jews always meet, and in secret I have said nothing. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. Indeed, they know that I said and what I said." And when he had said these things, one of the officers who stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, "Do you ask the high priest like that? Do you answer the high priest like that?" Jesus answered him, "If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil, but if well, why do you strike me?" Then Ananias sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest.
Then they laid Jesus from Caiaphas to the... Can't pronounce that. Sorry. And it was early morning, but they themselves did not go into that big word again. How do you pronounce it? Does anybody know? Anyway, Plectorium. Lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Pilate then went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered and said to him, "If he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you." Then Pilate said to them, "You take him and judge him according to your law." Therefore the Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." That they saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spoke, signifying by what death he would die. Then Pilate entered again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, "Are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you this concerning me?" Pilate answered, "And I am a Jew. Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight, so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here." Pilate therefore said to him, "Are you a king then?" Jesus answered, "You say rightly that I am a king. For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth," I can't see properly, "the truth hears my voice." Pilate said to them, "What is the truth?" And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, "I find no fault in him at all. But you have a custom that I should release someone to you at the Passover. Do you therefore want to release to you the king of the Jews?" Then they all cried again, saying, "No, not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber.
That's brilliant. Thank you. No, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so early Friday morning, because the Jewish trials were not allowed to vote at night, so it had to be done early on Friday morning to find out who actually was guilty. So Jesus is taken before the high priest Caiaphas, as he had been questioned by Annas first, and then questioned by the Sanhedrin, which really was just the council who handed the Jewish law, just in case anybody doesn't know what that is. He was accused of blasphemy, and he was condemned. In this period of time as well, it doesn't talk about it in John, but Peter denies knowing him 3 times, and Jesus confesses clearly that he was the Christ. So the council then found him guilty of blasphemy, and according to their law, worthy of death. So then if we just look at this picture then, this is just an artist's impression of what happened on this Friday morning. Then he was before Pilate, and this was now the stage of the Roman trial. The Roman government was always in Jerusalem during Passover in case of any outbursts of Jewish nationalism. And since the Jewish leaders can't execute him, they bring Jesus to this Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. And it was here that they shift the charge from blasphemy to political rebellion as king of the Jews. And this marks the transition just from one religious trial to a Roman civil one. So we see Pilate here, and you can see even just as he leans over, he's more interested in what everybody else and the crowds think rather than what the right decision is to make. So he's really seen here as this indecisive, weak man, compromising just to please everybody else. He wasn't concerned at all about justice. His only concern was to protect himself, his job, and Rome. And he tried even to find some loophole that would please both sides. He was afraid of the crowd, but he also started to grow afraid of his prisoner. He must have, just looking at that picture and seeing Jesus standing there must have been a presence. There must have been a difference that he could obviously feel from Jesus by being there. That godly authority of Jesus cannot be denied. At least 3 times, he even announces that Jesus wasn't guilty of any crime. Yet even in this, he refused to release him. In Luke 23, this is said, John 19, verse 6 as well. So he knew, he could feel it, he could see it, but he chose to go with the crowd. So if the Jews alone had judged Jesus and found him guilty, he would have been killed by stoning. And God was determined that Jesus would die by crucifixion, as it tells us in the Bible. Jesus was to bear the curse of the law and become a curse for us. And in order to do this, he had to die on a tree. So even the accusations that they were saying against Jesus, again, were false. They were so untrue. They talked about him opposing paying to Caesar. But in fact, Jesus taught the very opposite. Render therefore to Caesar the thing which are Caesar's, and unto God the thing that are God's, in Matthew 22, verse 21. And he didn't claim to be king. He did claim to be king, but not in this political sense. It was an upside-down kingdom, just like Ivana had talked about. It was a different king, had very different values to the world. Even his own disciples didn't fully understand these truths until they seen him after the resurrection, and he was often misunderstood. So in John 18, verse 37, Jesus explains exactly who he is and what kind of a kingdom belonged to him. But Pilate just didn't quite grasp how profound these words were. He was born, which shows his humanity, but he also came into the world, which means he existed before his birth at Bethlehem. And this is a repeated truth. In John chapter 3, verse 17, it says, God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. Jesus not only tells his origin, but he also explains his ministry to bear witness unto the truth. And he did win the people for his cause, not through force, but conviction and persuasion. He spoke the truth of God's word, and all who were his people would respond to his call. In John chapter 10, verse 27, it says, sheep, listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me. So Rome's weapon was the sword, but the Lord's weapon was the sword of the Spirit. So Pilate concludes that he finds no fault, and even asks, what is truth? Not sure if he's jesting or sincere, but he does refer to Jesus as the king 4 times, and this is even inscribed above the cross. But the elders and the chief priests just accuse Jesus all the more. Jesus was silent before his accusers, it tells us in 1 Peter 2, verses 21 to 23. And this silence, even just the silence, amazed Pilate. So he sent him to Herod, and he found no fault. Then Pilate offers to bargain with the Jewish leaders, as it was custom to release a prisoner and please Jews, or Barabbas, who was a robber, a notorious prisoner, a murderer. The people are persuaded by the chief priests and the elders, and they were not motivated by justice and equity. These national feelings always increased during Passover, so a vote for Barabbas was a vote against Rome. Even though Jesus had been a popular figure among the people, and even his triumphant entry, like Ivana talked about a few days before, hadn't led to an uprising to overthrow Rome, no Jewish liberation and freedom could be seen. So their condemning vote said nothing about the Son of God, but a great deal about them, using their feelings and not their brain. So then it says in John 14, verses 6 to 7, this is what Jesus was really showing, that he was the way. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He knew what he had to do. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. And from now on, you do not know him. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. So the verse that surrounds this whole chapter that really stood out to me was, my kingdom is not of this world. My kingdom is not of this world. So if we are followers of Jesus, then surely our lives should reflect this difference. And let's see how. I've just put lots of different things on how when Jesus goes before Pilate, how does this impact us today? What does this mean for us today? So speaking the truth openly at timely moments. There's such a danger of going along with the crowd, just like Pilate did. And we can see that going with the crowd ultimately leads to death. And we see this with Pilate. He's a great example of this. Instead of going with the truth that he could clearly feel and see, his own people handed him over. Even when I talked about this in my class this week, the look on their faces, the anguish on their faces, they were distraught, because we had talked about how, the triumphant entry into Jerusalem, they knew that he was like the king, his disciples, all that loved him, and all of a sudden, here he was, his own people, handing him over to Pilate for death. And my class just could not grasp this, how this could possibly be possible with somebody that was so good. They kept telling me, but he's so good, he's so good. But in John 8, chapter 32, it says, know the truth, and the truth will set you free, instead of being this slave to sin. So how many times do we hear something that is not right spoken in front of us, but we say nothing as it's more comfortable, it's less awkward, but we don't see our silence as the agreement with the lies spoken? It takes courage to hold to your convictions without shrinking. It also takes courage to guard our tone so that conviction doesn't turn into contempt, offense, or bitterness. Jesus embodies this beautifully. He could sit at the table of tax collectors and sinners without adopting their values, yet he could confront religious hypocrisy without losing that compelling compassion. His strength was unmistakable, yet it was never insecure. He did not need to dominate the room in order to remain faithful to the Father. So just this morning, as we think of that, speaking of the truth, where are we tempted to compromise in order to avoid tension? Where are we tempted to overreact in order to prove a point? Neither compromise or aggression reflects the heart of Christ. Let's all pray for that kind of inner rootedness that allows us to speak truth without defensiveness and to disagree without disdain. Speaking that truth in love. And then the other one with the cross then just reminds us about that obedience to God no matter what the cost. Jesus obeyed God, and it cost him everything. It cost him everything on the cross. We see here the extravagant love of Jesus and obedience to the Father, hearing all the accusations, yet remaining silent, as he knew his death had to happen in this way to save us, because he was thinking of us when he was hanging there, and repair that relationship between man and God. Doing what is right over what is easy, remaining in that calm obedience. And the only way that we can do that is that constant communion with the Father in prayer, like the opportunities that we'll have in our prayer room this week. What about then the rich young ruler in Mark 19 who followed the commandments, which felt much easier and much more straightforward in comparison than selling his possessions and giving them to the poor like Jesus had said? His wealth was a barrier to following Christ. He was showing the young man that total loyalty to God must come first before possessions. And then number 3, living from the truth and knowing that you're an atmosphere changer. So just like this week when we've had brief moments of sunshine and the brightness has come out amidst all the hailstones and darkness, it changes things. I know in schools, it changes the classroom atmosphere when the sun comes out. Everybody's so much more joyful and so excited and so happy. And if we really live from that truth, we can change things just like the sunshine, not because of anything we have done, but because of Jesus. So Pilate recognized there was something special about Jesus. He couldn't quite work out what it was, but he must have felt the difference of Jesus being there. And his wife then confirmed with her dream not to get involved, which is why it does tell us in other chapters that he cleans his hands and washes his hands physically to show he wasn't having anything to do with the decision, and makes it easy for himself, allowing the other people to decide. So do people around us sense something different about us? When we walk into rooms, we can change atmospheres just by being there because of the Spirit that dwells within us when we know Jesus, and making us and walking temples of God's righteousness and peace. As people filled with the Spirit, believers carry that authority that can shake the very environment that they're in, shaking and changing things, causing atmospheres of fear or tension to shift to peace and boldness. So let's be atmosphere changers and be that faithful presence in the room. It says in Acts chapter 4, verse 31, after they prayed, the place where they were meeting was shaken, and they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and spoke the word of God boldly. Do we listen to the voice of the Father, or are we listening to the lies of the enemy that tries to kill, to steal, and destroy? And as I've said before, God has designed our brains in such an amazing way that we are shaped by what we repeatedly focus on. So what are you repeatedly focusing on? Is it God's truths about who you are and your identity and what he's done for you, or is it the lies of the enemy that you're constantly focusing on? And then the eye then, to remind us about that godly discernment and praying for those eyes to see. Jesus' own people handed him over, the very people he came to save. The leaders were jealous, they were self-seeking. They didn't have eyes to see what was right in front of their very eyes, right beside them, the discernment. And even remembering our Daniel series, Daniel used his discernment, his wisdom and insight throughout his life to navigate pagan Babylon while honouring God. Discernment is shown through his interpretation of dreams, through his integrity, and his constant reliance on prayer, his relationship with the Father, for guidance which enabled him to thrive in such a hostile environment. What do you need discernment for today? Don't rely on human wisdom. That will only disappoint. Pray for those eyes to see and that wisdom from God. And then knowing your purpose. So the big question mark, and hopefully lots of all the young adults will know all of this by the end of tonight when they speak with Stephen. But it's so, so vitally important to know why we're here. The kingdom of Jesus is not of this world. It's an upside-down kingdom serving others. And Jesus knew exactly why he'd been sent, and he was very clear in his purpose and why he was here for this moment in time. Do you know your why? This upside-down kingdom that Jesus talked about, it had so many different values from the world. Just like when we think of even how Jesus came into the world, he didn't come in and born in a beautiful big palace. There was no room. And was this almost saying that people in this world would have no room for Jesus in their lives with all the distractions and all the different things that crowd in their lives? He was born in a stable. As Ivana was talking about, he rode in a donkey, not a chariot, into Jerusalem. At the Last Supper, he didn't sit at the table and ask everybody else to come and serve him. No, instead, he showed them how to be a really good leader and got down on his hands and knees and washed the dirt from their feet. He served them. So we can see such a difference. King Jesus had humility, putting others first. He had service in his life, washing the disciples' feet. And the greatest love in dying for us. He thought of you. Your name was in his head when he was dying on the cross for you. He loved you so much. Yet even in our Daniel story, when we looked at King Nebuchadnezzar, he was a brilliant example of showing us how not to live, because all he thought about was power. All he thought about was life is all about me. Wealth and status. Even Nehemiah maintained unwavering focus when he rebuilt Jerusalem's walls. He was very clear on his purpose, despite the intent opposition and distraction from his enemies, declaring, I am doing a great work and cannot come down. He combined prayer with practical action, organizing workers, establishing security, and staying dedicated until the wall was completely completed in the 52 days. Do you ask God what he asks you to do through this combination of scripture and prayer? So just like I said at the very, very beginning, all of this, just with Jesus standing in front of Pilate, I didn't realize that we could learn so many things from this one interaction with Jesus and these different people he had to stand in front of. But we really see through all of this that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And will you choose this today? And I don't put all of these up, speaking the truth and obeying God, as tick boxes or something loophole that you have to go through or a magic formula, but just to listen as you look at these pictures today or as you read the word, because God speaks to us in all very different ways. Is there one thing that stands out to you today? Is there one thing that God is highlighting to you today that you could say, yeah, I want to be that atmosphere changer. I want to change things in the room. I will speak the truth about God. I will obey God no matter what the cost. Is he asking you to do something? And for all of us to pray for that godly discernment, that we will hear the wisdom of God and know what he wants us to do in every situation. Because he's with us, and he's with us now, and he's in every situation.
Thanks for listening to this message. For more information on what's happening in the life of our church, visit vineyarddungannon.co.uk.